Okay, it's 9 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Basically, this is kind of a review of the one we did almost a month ago, and then some new content. So we have found that Zscaler has been making some changes to the experience, which is sort of the landing page you get to when you go to console.zscaler.com. So I'm going to go over some of those changes. Just know that I have updated that spreadsheet that's also linked in the this slide deck, and I'll kind of briefly go over that spreadsheet as well near the end of this. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this presentation, and I'm going to go and actually log into Zscaler. So this is the Zscaler experience, console.zscaler.com. This is kind of the landing page when you log in. From here, you can access ZIA, you can access ZCC, and you can also access their authentication services, which used to be called zIdentity. When you go down to administration and identity, right here, the service portal link, when you click on that, it opens this dashboard. So once again, as I said, ZIA, which is the standard Zscaler content filtering service, web security service, CCC, which is the Zscaler Client Connector admin page, and then the Authentication Services and Administration, which is once named zIdentity. From here, you can entitle users. When you first log in or you first claim the account, which is the admin account, it will be admin at whatever domain you choose, .zslogin.net. Once you've claimed your account, then you need to go in there and actually entitle other users by giving them rights. The easiest way to do that is to select the user that you want to entitle. So I'm gonna go ahead and select Brian here. I'm going to edit his account. When you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that these two will already be listed there. The one you need to add is the Zscaler Global Admin. Once you add that group, they will be entitled for both ZIA, CCC, and the administrative services, which used to be called zIdentity. Okay. That's the easiest way to do this and get those users to a point where they can actually manage Zscaler similar to the way they did before. Okay. When you hit update, it used to send them an email. It doesn't seem like it's working anymore, at least with the first, a few folks that I've worked with over the last couple weeks. Zscaler, like I said, has been making changes on the back end of this. So what I've been telling folks to do is you can log in with your new account, right? And then there'll be a forgot or having trouble logging in link there. When you click on that, it will automatically send the email address associated with this account, which isn't this, right? It's your actual Google or Office 365 email. And from that email that you get, there'll be a link to reset the password. Once you reset the password, it will walk you through setting up the two-factor. And then once you've set that up, then you'll be able to get into Zscaler. I just kind of want to review some things in the experience or the experience center. Everything that you can do in CCC and in ZIA can be done here. So all your policies for Zscaler, right? And CCC are all contained here. I have found that sometimes it's difficult to find what you're looking for because, like I said, Zscaler kind of sort of puts things in places where sometimes does not make in complete a sense to us, but made sense to their developers. But what I have found is that this search function actually works very well. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna type URL, and I want to look at the URL categories. So it will take me to this position in experience where that function is available. Okay. So these are all my custom categories and Zscaler's categories. All my custom categories are under user defined, just like they would be in CIA. Okay. Your advanced settings, which is where you would manage your off or your off bypass policies, right? And then of course your URL filtering policies are here too under this URL control section. Okay. But you can see if you walk back, you can see where that is, right? It's under policies, internet and SaaS, and then URL categories. Here's your URL filtering policies. Here's your advanced settings. This is all the security settings, right? So file type controls, right? And then your cloud app controls are right here. So like I said, if you're poking around in here and you can't find what you're looking for, the search function works well as long as you know what you're looking for. Okay. But at the end of the day, you can always go back to here, this service portal, right? And click on Zscaler Internet Access. Zscaler Internet Access is going to take you to the old UI. And just know that any changes you make here get reflected in experience, and any changes you make in experience will get reflected here. The one thing you should keep in mind is that come September, this is going to become read-only. You won't be allowed to make changes in this old infrastructure. And any new updates that get made to the Zscaler service will only be applied to the experience. So at some point, these will not be parity. If this loads.
While that's loading, we have a question that says, I have tickets open, but Zscaler does not send me the after migration email. Not an inbox spam or quarantine. Currently, I cannot even log into the classic UI. They've run
So
my
you mean your
migration at least.
pre is so has the admin account been claimed?
To the person who asked the question, if you raise your hand, I can give you speaking ability, or you can use the chat to answer questions, to like have more of a conversation. Oh, yeah, there you go.
So have you claimed your account, Sonia? Your admin account? So you have your admin at your domain, which you chose, .zslogin.net.
You have the ability to speak it, but you're on mute. So you have to take yourself off mute.
Sorry, thought I had already pressed that. Yes, once when they sent the initial email out telling us to claim the account, I claimed the account.
Okay. And when you log in as admin at your domain.zslogin.net and you end up in experience, are you seeing all these items at the top?
It won't let me log into the new UI either. I found out after searching for the email under audit investigation, they were sending it to a different account than mine. I don't know why.
Okay.
But I notified them. They updated the ticket. They said they've changed it on Zscaler's end. It's just a mess right now. I can't get in either UI at the moment.
Okay. It may be worth scheduling a Zoom call so that we can look over your shoulder and see
Okay.
what's going on, because it's kind of hard for me to speak to something I can't really see. I will tell you the things that I've been noticing with, at least with claiming of the admin accounts, is that users are not finishing the migration. And because they're not finishing the migration, they're not able to access the full capabilities, right? So it'd be pretty easy to at least tell once we get you in there if that's the case, right?
Yeah. To finish the migration, you would have to get the after migration email there, right?
There is no after migration email.
Oh, they keep telling me to look for an email when they might do the migration. They run the
No,
migration.
they send you a pre-migration email, which basically says claim your admin account. When you get that email address, it'll have a link. You click on that, it will take you to the portal, right? And it basically will have you log in as or will have you claim the admin account. Okay. And when you claim the admin account initially, it's going to say, okay, you need to go ahead and set a password. You need to go ahead and, well, first of all, you need to define a domain. So most people have just been using whatever their old domain was without the whole thing, right? So if yours was, something.k12.nc.us, you don't have to use the whole k12.nc.us. You could use just the first part, right? .zslogin.net. Now, as soon as you put that in, Zscaler will tell you that's allowed or that's already been used, right? because I will tell you, we've been finding that because this is a global thing, this is a multi-tenant environment that, you know, the domain could be claimed by somebody else. So just be aware of that. Um, but once you get past that part, right, you claimed your domain, you got the admin account, it had you set a password, then it takes you to the next spot where it says, okay, now we need to configure two-factor. And that's where it gives you the QR code. So you can take a picture of it and put in Google Authenticator and get that started.
Right.
Then it'll ask you for the code, you put it in, and at that point, you're logged in. Now, once you're logged in, it will say, click this link to finish the migration. It'll be up at the top in the bar. Once you click that, then it basically will come back and say, okay, you have, I think it's like 24 hours, 72 hours to revert this. Don't ever click that. Because it puts the UI in a weird state. But at that point, you're migrated. Now, at that point, what you need to do is you need to entitle your users. And usually what I tell people to do is entitle yourself first. Like when I go in here and I go to identity, well, let me just go here. You can see that I own the admin account, but then I also have another account for myself. Well, I did. I must have deleted it. So I actually had a Gons at NC Rent account because it just made sense to have an account that I'm used to using, right? And then you would go through that process that I mentioned earlier about entitling yourself, right? So you would go ahead and you would add that global group so that you would have access to Z Identity, ZIA, and CCC. I will say that I've noticed that when if you try to entitle yourself while you're in there, which some people have, you have to actually log out and log back in to see the effect of that. Okay.
There's at least one other person who's saying that after doing the like admin account claiming, they could log in the very first time, but now they haven't been able to, and they've done like a password reset, etc. So, can I have a show of hands of people who, at any point in this migration process, suddenly can't log in anymore?
Yeah, let's go. I don't know who else. I can just
Okay. So Diane is making note of
problem sites.
the problem sites so that we can reach out. I
Right.
think a Zoom call is going to be the easiest way to resolve this because we need to be able to see what you see.
Okay, we've got
So
four.
the
So
second
we got
person.
5 so far of people who can't log in once they've
Okay.
the migration. 5, 6. So we're at 6.
Okay. Well, they're tickets for everybody, so if we can find out who they are, we'll get them taken care of. Okay.
Okay. So as I was saying, this is where you're going to want to spend your time because eventually this is going to become the UI, and it is a unified UI. Every setting, every toggle, every configuration is all in here. It's just sometimes it's in weird places, which is why I said that the search function is very helpful in this experience. Because I mean, I've gone through every single setting, which I guess I could go ahead and bring up the spreadsheet, which is also linked in the presentation, is this one here, which is where I went through all the functions that most people were using, and I basically identified where that function is in the new UI. Just know that I did this prior to that webinar we did a month ago, and since then I had to go back in here and fix it because Zscaler moved stuff around, they renamed stuff, they just made changes. So it should be up to date at least from a week ago. So just be aware of that. I will continue to monitor this, and if changes do get made again, I will make sure that I update this spreadsheet. So, like I said, this link is in the presentation, which I'll go back to the presentation real quick. It's right here, and this presentation will be shared along with the video recording so that you guys will have access to that sheet. Okay. But cloud identity or experience, like I said, this is going to be the UI moving forward. There are new helps associated with this as well. I want you to be aware of that. You can break these out into their own page, which I usually recommend because they're easier to use. But it breaks down the different functions and everything in there. The one thing you will notice if you looked at their helps prior to a couple weeks ago, Z identity was highly mentioned in here, but it's not in here anymore. So just be aware of that. Okay. Go back here. The experience. Let me do this again. Yeah. So here's the information all about just Z experience. Okay. Something else I wanted to point out is within Z experience, you have these analytics. Right now, these are, present data that could be useful, but they're not as useful as the old dashboards. Okay. If you want to access the old dashboards from within experience, you have to go down to the bottom of the page here and switch this to existing reports. And then magically the old dashboards appear in experience. And these are more in tune with what folks were used to doing by analyzing this chart, right? And digging into this information a little bit more. If I wanted to see what these IP addresses were associated with these specific transactions, right? So the old dashboards work the way they did in ZIA. I will tell you, until the new dashboards or new analytics graphics get more functionality, right now they're just pretty much static. Okay. But this is basically where most people live and work. So I definitely recommend when you first log in, just know that every time you log in, that toggle will go back to being the way it was before. So you'll have to activate it again. Okay. The logs are all available here. There's also a new streaming log. Not a lot of PSUs take advantage of the Nalog streaming service. It requires deployment of an appliance that acts as the receiver, right? But like I said, there is actually a new streaming for the actual authentication services. So if you wanted to be able to have these logs readily available so that you could see who's logging in, when they logged in, and things like that, that would be another feed that you would want to add to your NSS. Also, within just the normal NSS service, you can actually have logs like your threat logs, your URL logs, access logs, things like that. All that can be sent down via the NSS configuration. Okay. And if anyone's really interested in this, definitely reach out because it does take some work to set up. We will be more than happy to work with you. Just know you have to deploy a VM in your environment somewhere that actually will act as the receiver for all these logs. So when something happens in Zscaler, that log gets shipped to that device. Now, of course, you need to have something to be able to see those logs because all that is, that NSS appliance, it is just a collector for the logs. You still have to feed those logs into something else. Okay. Like, syslog or, some other type of stem or something like that. Right. I mean, so I'm sorry, not stem, sim, right? I chose Graylog for my lab, and that's where I send my logs. I send them to Graylog, and then within Graylog, you can configure different dashboards and reporting and alerting options. Okay. But like I said, if someone's really interested about this, I definitely would like to have a conversation because it's going to take some work to set up and we have to understand how you want these logs to be provided. Okay. So as I was saying, everything that you would do in the other UIs are all packaged here. But at the end of the day, if you are not sure, you could always search for it if you know what you're looking for, right? Let's go with DCC. Do it that easy. Client. What do you mean it's not in there? I know it's in there. Zscaler client connector.
Oh,
Because this is the data from Zscaler client connector.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to use my cheat sheet because I don't remember where it is. Okay, infrastructure connector, Zscaler client connector. So here are your app policies, your forwarding policies, the different settings within there. Let me try this. Yeah, that's why. Like I said, the search function, if you know what you're looking for, you can find it. But at the end of the day, you could always reference the old UIs, which is what I've been doing to kind of sort of level set during this process. But just know come September, these old UIs will become read only, and you will not be allowed to make changes. If you do make changes in the old one, it does get reflected in experience. If you make changes in experience, it get reflected in the old one. Just know that the cutoff date for that is going to be September. This trust portal basically is just like an RSS feed of up-down kind of information from Zscaler. So if you're ever wondering if something isn't working, let's say you're having an issue with authentication and you wanted to know whether or not Zscaler is having issues with authentication, you could go in here and see whether or not there is anything going on. Okay. I'm going to tell you, it used to be under policies, ZCC, but they moved it to infrastructure. And as you can see, it was in my cheat sheet. So apparently I updated it and I forgot it was there. So at the end of the day, as you're going through here, if you start to see where things aren't where you thought they were, reference the cheat sheet. That's why we put it together. And I will continue to monitor updates to this because they're not actually telling us that they're updating this UI. They're basically the updates just kind of show up, which is, somewhat concerning. But at the end of the day, we will do our best to try to manage Zscaler and this process. The migration to what was previously known as the identity, which is the authentication services, is going pretty well. We've had some minor hiccups as folks have indicated. The not being able to log in after claiming your account is a new one. So once we have a look at that, we will better understand what's going on there. Just know that we are staying on top of it as much as we possibly can because we are your technical contact for this service. I will tell you, we have clients that do actually open tickets with Zscaler, and depending on the scope of the issue, Zscaler could be helpful. Other times, they're not as helpful because that person on the other end doesn't completely understand our environment. It is not a typical Zscaler deployment because we have private Zens or what they call private edge nodes. So getting help from them, like I said, sometimes could be could take longer than it should, which is why you should always open a ticket with us and have us assist you. If there's anything. And for folks, that we're doing backup and recovery of your policies, that's all still in there. Everything is in here just like it was before. What I would like to do is actually spend a little time in the logs if we could, because I find that people get the most value out here, and and we always get questions about how do I find X? Your logs are a wealth of information. All your transactions are in here. I generated some traffic this morning, which is why you're seeing a lot of stuff in here. Prior to 6 o'clock this morning, this was pretty empty because this is my lab. There's not really much going on there except for maybe a couple of servers and a couple of workstations. There are no real users. But I went ahead and generated traffic because it's always useful to have something to look at. If you were concerned about what's going on in your environment is pertaining to a specific application like Facebook, you go in here and say, you could say, well, what are the IP addresses associated with this? Now, just know that you see these are all internal addresses because this GRE has already been migrated onto the firewall, which puts it inside the NAT boundary. If it had not been in the NAT boundary, you would be seeing your 152.26 addresses in here. Okay. So just be aware of that. But I can go back and let's say I want to see in here, I want to only see stuff that isn't being blocked, right? So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna put in a policy action, and I'm going to go ahead and tell it to only show me stuff that's being allowed, and I'm gonna apply that filter. So we can see there's some stuff that's being allowed, like Craigslist or WordPress or X or Snapchat, LinkedIn. I could update my policies to block this stuff if that's what I wanted to do. And if you do have a policy, let's say block Craigslist, right? This would be an easy way to say, well, some Craigslist is being allowed. Maybe you should look and see what URLs are actually associated with this traffic. So these are URLs. So it looks pretty typical Craigslist stuff. So I could either go about one or two ways to actually block this traffic if I chose to do so. I could do it with either a cloud app control or I could do it with a URL policy. If I do it with a URL policy, you could add these categories or add just .craigslist.org, which would cover all three of these, and then put that into a block policy. I always like to kind of sort of avoid the whole blacklist, whitelist, because sometimes people think those are just magic categories and they just work. They do not. You call them whatever you want to call them, right? And then you set them in a policy accordingly to either allow or to block that traffic. But I could also do this as a cloud app control, which would be cleaner because then I wouldn't have to worry about them adding a new URL tomorrow, right? Cloud app controls are designed to keep track of all the URLs that are associated with those particular applications. So sometimes the cloud app control is the most efficient way to go. I will tell you that if you're not doing SSL inspection, cloud app controls can be about 80% effective. Okay, because without SSL inspection, we can't see everything in those transactions. So it's kind of hard to identify some stuff that's getting through. But like I said, 80%. And then if there is something that's not being blocked, then a URL policy would be the way to go. Sometimes with a URL policy, you might not want to block. Like you can see this is, cloud app. In the URL policy, it may just be social networking, right? Which is very broad because it covers a lot of things. So you may not want to block all of social networking when you're trying to block one thing, because I will tell you that Pinterest, which a lot of PSUs use, is also categorized as social networking. And if you block social networking, Pinterest gets blocked, and then you get an email from a teacher saying, I can't get to my board that I want to use, to teach X, right? So you want to be aware of how things are categorized when you're using broad URL blocks. Now, if you're using a custom category, which is related to the categories that you have added yourself, then it's a little bit more secure in the sense of that you didn't block something you didn't intend to. But you want to avoid always using URL categories. I would leverage cloud app controls first to at least get a little bit more bang for your buck, because you don't have to identify every single URL associated with a particular website. As some of you have seen in the past, generally when you're having issues, we ask for a HAR file. And the reason why we ask for a HAR file is because that's all the stuff that gets loaded on the backside when you access a website. If you ever want to see what noise looks like, you could go ahead and start a HAR file and then go to CNN.com. There are a ton of URLs that get loaded as part of that website because they syndicate a bunch of stuff. Okay. So, and then trying to figure out what within that stream you want to add to a custom category can be somewhat difficult, especially when, there's just a lot of noise because some of it necessarily does not even have anything to do with the site, but it may have to do with a Facebook button or a LinkedIn button or a Snapchat button that's at the end of the website. Okay. So like I said, you custom categories, you really want to use those as sort of like your last resort if you can leverage and get what you're trying to block or allow via a cloud app control. Okay. So I mentioned the helps. I mentioned the spreadsheet. And we talked about authentication services. Just know that the only thing you're really going to do in here is manage your administrators. You are not managing your users here because your users still reside in whatever mechanism you were using previously, which in some cases it's, Active Directory, which that's starting to be fewer than there were before, Google, SAML, or Office 365, or Entra, or Azure. Those are usually the best places to have your users in because it's really easy to manage them on your end without having to try to manage them within Active Directory. And it also kind of sort of fail-safes you as well because if your network goes down, you don't have access to AD, it's kind of hard to authenticate users. Now, granted, for the most part, most people only authenticate once, and as long as the cookie is there, the user will continue to be authenticated. But there have been cases where new users get added. That did not get synced down because AD is down, and the user cannot authenticate, so they cannot get to anywhere on the internet. So having SAML or the use of SAML prevents that from happening because we have not seen, I mean, probably in the last 20 years, I've only seen Google go down once that I can think of. Yeah. So it's a pretty resilient service. So I'd like to go ahead and open it up for additional questions if we have any.
We don't have any so far. We have had one person say that they had to reset their password multiple times and then they could log in.
That is interesting as well because every time you reset your password, you burn a password. Because I think it keeps track of like the last 10 or something like that. Just know that is somewhat configurable. And so it is somewhat configurable. I would just be really careful. Well, actually, the last 5 about how you about turning off any of these toggles. The only one that I would probably recommend is this one here. Because if you're forcing complex passwords, right? You should not have to change them that often. Complex password would be about at least 15 characters, right? Very hard to crack a 15-character password, at least until Quantum becomes very readily available. It's kind of hard it takes a long time to crack a 15-character password. And when I say 15-character password, I don't mean actually a password per se, unless you're using a password manager. I would recommend a passphrase, like my dog has fleas. I'm not saying use that one, but something similar to that, right? Because it's really easy to remember a phrase, especially if you kind of sort of tie it to the service you're logging into. Okay. And not that you want to use the name of the service, but something that would relate to it, right? Like I keep my money in a mattress, and that's your password for your bank. Something that would make sense to you and make it easy for you to recall. Password managers are definitely recommended because at that point you could generate complex passwords that you'll never be able to remember. But then they all get stored in there.
Okay.
But go ahead.
We finish. Yeah, you can finish your sentence.
I was going to say, I mean, but yes, I would definitely recommend changing this because um, it. I think it was originally set to like 60 days or something like that. And as we all know, this service is pretty new. You don't want to be changing your passwords a bunch of times. But also,
I think the reason they had to do that is because it wouldn't let them in. It was like that same error where it wasn't like they had the password correct, but it wasn't working, and it didn't work until they reset it multiple times. I think was what the point they were saying.
yeah. And I know we're all technologists. Generally what I do when a password doesn't work is I type it into a notepad to see what the password looks like. Because I don't think you can actually see this password when you're typing it in. It doesn't give you that option to visually see the password. I have seen cases where for whatever reason, I put in the wrong character in the wrong place because my password is really long and it has some complexity to it, and my fingers don't always cooperate. So that's always a good check. If you put it in twice and it doesn't work, that would be worth at least visualizing the password to make sure that you're typing it in correctly. Now definitely don't save it. Delete it after you're done, right? But
Um,
that is go ahead.
yeah, I think some people they said they've been like they save the password in a like password saver. They know they have the password correct, but Zscaler is like not letting them log in, and
Okay.
that's been I think that was kind of the issue with Sonia as well.
hmm
Uh,
And I would be careful with saving them in the browser, because it's really easy to compromise that. Um, just so you know, I've seen it happen. Um, Using a password manager is definitely the way to go because that requires additional authentication in order to access that vault of passwords. Saving them in the browser is always bad. Just that's my 2 cents. And
yeah, yeah. It seems like the people who have been having the issues, like they know they have the password correct, and something about the Zscaler new UI has not been letting them in.
okay, so just so I did actually encounter something similar to that where the password they were saving it in their browser. Just be aware of that. Uh, and when they saved it to the browser, it did not save the correct username. Okay, so it didn't save admin at domain.zslogin.net. And that's the reason why it wasn't working. It wasn't the password, it was that the username that was being used as part of that authentication process was incorrect. So that may be something to look at. But like I said, try your best not to save your passwords in your browser because, like I said, I've worked with people who have actually had their browser compromised through, no fault of their own. And now all those passwords are in the wild, and some of them were to some pretty important stuff. And I helped them walk through the process of changing every single password in every single application and a website that they use. It was a very tedious process. Okay.
So for everyone who's been having trouble logging in, we've noted all of you. We found your tickets. Oh yeah, another person said it was in a password manager. They sent a screenshot. Um, I'm pretty sure I could get in last week, but now I can't. So we're noting all of these. There's a related issue that I want to make sure I bring up so that we don't lose it. But again, we've found the tickets that y'all have open and we're working on them. But again, please tell us because it looks like this is kind of a pattern of a problem. So that's good for us to know. But the related issue is I was able to get in with the admin account, but I cannot get in with my own account and don't get
And
emails to my new user. And I'm
that
wondering if
could be an entitlement issue.
that's what I was going to say. I wonder if that has to do with the entitlement. So I wonder
Yeah,
if
that is definitely an entitlement issue. And if you need to, like I said, if you go into, and I know I've got this open bunches of times, but go in there, as admin, look at the user and make sure that you've added this Zscaler global administrator. Because if you haven't done that, it's definitely an entitlement issue. Okay.
and I don't know if the person who asked that wants to give any more details, but like if you can confirm that you've done the entitlement and it's still not working or anything.
Yeah, if you've done the entitlement, it's not working, we definitely want to look at it. Another thing that kind of gives you a clue that it's an entitlement issue is when you log in, you'll only see like two things up here. You won't see all these options up here at the top. That's another indicator that you're not entitled fully. Any other questions that we can answer?
So far, it's just a slew of the logging in issue.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely want to talk with you to see if we can identify what's going on there, because that is definitely not one where we've seen people having to reset their password a bunch of times. Okay.
Okay, I think we have a new question. MCNC logins to our Zscaler. Do we get rid of the older, non-modern Zscaler logins?
Yeah.
So yes, you can get rid of the MCNC one and the MCNC Ops one. There'll be two admin ones in there. One will say depreciated, and the other one will have a number in it. Do not delete those two. The depreciated one can't be used anymore, but we're leaving it in there until Zscaler tells us to delete it. The other one is actually used for the partner portal, which is how we access your UI when we're working with you. And when we log in via the partner portal, just know that we have unique accounts. And when we log into your UI from the partner portal, you will see the name of the user. It will not be a generic account. And that is basically for auditing purposes, right? We're doing away with all generic accounts, and kind of Z identity or authentication services is doing the same thing, because now everyone has to have a unique account because you have to be able to do two-factor against it, and it has to have a legitimate email in order to receive password resets. Now, could that legitimate account be an alias? It could be. I would recommend not doing that because you don't want to be saving the QR code and sharing with a bunch of people, because that is bad security.
Hey, can you show the cloud app example versus the old URL config? I may have missed that part. For example, like
So,
TikTok cloud app versus URL.
okay, so URL filtering is based on categories, right? So here's a URL policy, right? It's based on URL categories, right? It could be Zscaler's categories, or it could be a custom category like this one is, okay? Cloud app controls are actually under here, are actually named controls. Like this one is for Note GPT, right? This one is for Chat GPT and various others, AI related services, right? Google Doodle Games. This one surprised me. It actually is an app. We use this to kind of sort of test what someone wanted to block, and it was effective. So they deployed it in their environment because apparently there's a bunch of games under this Google Doodle Games that kids can play. So they wanted to stop that. Zoom, of course, is allowed, right? So they're named apps, and those are all contained here. Just know that these categories sometimes, it's kind of hard to tell what something is, right? Like, what is system and development? Well, you could always go ahead and just add one, right? And then go in here and actually look at the applications associated with it, right? And see whether or not this is of use to you. As you know, Zscaler is an international company. Sometimes there's applications in here that aren't used in the US. So just be aware of that. Okay. But it's easy enough to be able to tell whether or not this is pertinent to you by looking for the application you're looking for. Okay. Cancel that. The ones that I find useful, as you can see, the AI one, DNS over HTTPS. I recommend blocking, DOH, because if you're not blocking DOH, then if you're using DNS for read writes, or you're using any kind of DNS filtering, this will circumvent that. Okay. File sharing, hosting providers, IT services. This is another one of those that's kind of sort of ambiguous, right? Because there's a lot of stuff in there. Social networking. Also, just for so let's go here, Web Insights, and I'm going to go ahead and go to logs as for an example, just make it a little bit easier. Give me my logs. Yeah. I want to see anything that's being blocked, because I know I've got some blocked stuff in here because I did a lot of bad stuff this morning. So policy action. I don't want to show only blocked stuff. Favors all day and run this query. When you're looking at the logs for the transactions, if there is a cloud app associated with it, you will see that here, right? You can see this one here. It's a URL category professional services, but there is no cloud app associated with it. But here, Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google DNS, right? So you can see if you look in the logs and something's being blocked, right, and you're trying to allow it, or something's being allowed and you're trying to block it, this would be the easy way to figure out what cloud app is associated with it, and if there indeed is a cloud app associated with it, right? Because you definitely don't want to be blocking professional services as a URL category, right? That'd probably block a lot more than you intend to, right? The question is, what is this? Just know that the way I generate traffic in my lab environment is I use a script. I download the top 1 million websites visited. So I get the 1 million most popular websites, and I use that as the feed to my script that runs all these transactions. Okay. I also have some cases where I run these same transactions through CCC. So you can see I have a username associated with those transactions, because CCC has to be authenticated and CCC has to be SSL inspected. So this is the difference between an authenticated user and a unauthenticated location. Okay. And we have a webinar coming up here at the end of the month where we're going to actually be going through some troubleshooting in Zscaler, and I'll go more in depth in this. I just wanted to show you an example of how you would identify the cloud app if you wanted to. Okay. Any other questions I can answer?
Yeah, that webinar is next Tuesday for anyone wondering. You should have gotten an email, I think, either yesterday or late last week about registering for our troubleshooting day. It's going to be a series of webinars all day. You don't have to come to every single one of them, but one of them will be Gon's talking about using Zscaler for troubleshooting. A couple of people who were having login issues with the actual password have said that it was an entitlement issue. It was
Okay.
After they
Awesome.
did the entitlement, there was a different admin account. So I want to share that to the group.
Yeah, the three things that I have seen has been not fully migrating and entitlements, right? And then the other one has been, as I mentioned before, where they're saving it in a password saver, and it's not saving the username. It's only saving the password. So the username is blank. So when they go to try to use that, it does not authenticate properly. Even though the URL for the website was saved correctly, the username was not. Okay. And hopefully that'll help everyone else that's probably having issues. But at the end of the day, if you're having issues getting in or claiming your account or finishing your migration, definitely let us know. We're happy to work with you to get you over that hump. Because we know that this is, this is a pretty stressful time. School's going to be starting soon, and you've got a lot of things that you need to take care of. Any other questions or comments?
Just responding to someone individually. No other questions or comments so far.
Okay. Just know that if something does come up, definitely feel free to reach out. We are happy to work with you. We appreciate your time, because we know you guys are busy. I tried not to spend a lot of time boring you guys. Hopefully what I presented was helpful. And look forward to the troubleshooting webinar coming up. Working on some hopefully some interesting examples that will start to kind of put those wrinkles in your brain of how you can better leverage Zscaler to identify the issues that you're having and fix them. If we've got nothing else, I'll give you back 8 minutes of your day. We good?
Yeah, no new messages so far. Yeah, and I think we have people dropping off now.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.